During the 1920s, some freedoms were expanded while others were taken away. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in 1919, had banned the manufacture and sale of intoxicating liquors. And on January 16, 1920, the Federal Volstead Act closed every tavern, bar, and saloon in the United States.
Prohibition was initiated as part of the temperance movement, which asserted that alcohol and intoxication were responsible for crime, murder, and other negative aspects of society. From then on, it was illegal to sell any intoxicating beverages with more than 0.5% alcohol. This drove the liquor trade underground. Now people simply went to illegal speakeasies instead of ordinary bars, where it was controlled by bootleggers and other organized crime figures such as Chicago gangster Al Capone. Capone reportedly had 1,000 gunmen and half of Chicago's police force on his payroll. Drinking was a symbol of all they disliked about the modern city, and eliminating alcohol would, they believed, turn back the clock to an earlier and more comfortable time.
Both federal and local governments struggled to enforce prohibition over the 1920s. In general, prohibition was enforced much more strongly in the mainly rural areas and small towns and much more loosely in urban areas. Despite very early signs of success, including a decline in arrests for drunkenness and a reported 30% drop in alcohol consumption, those who wanted to keep drinking found sneaky ways to continue drinking.
The illegal manufacture and sale of liquor went on throughout the decade, along with the operation of speakeasies, which were stores or nightclubs selling alcohol, the smuggling of alcohol across the state lines, and the informal production of liquor in private homes.
In addition, the Prohibition era encouraged the rise of criminal activity associated with bootlegging. The most notorious example was the Chicago gangster Al Capone, who earned a staggering $60 million annually from bootleg operations and speakeasies. Such illegal operations fueled a corresponding rise in gang violence.
The high price of bootleg liquor meant that the nation's working class and the poor were far more restricted during Prohibition than middle or upper class Americans. With the country in the Great Depression by 1932 creating jobs and revenue by legalizing liquor, the industry had a lot of support.
FDR's victory meant the end of Prohibition, and in February 1933, Congress adopted a resolution proposing a 21st Amendment to the Constitution that would repeal the 18th Amendment. The amendment was submitted to the states, and in December 1933, Utah provided the 36th and final necessary vote for ratification. Though a few states continued to prohibit alcohol after its prohibition end, all had abandoned the ban by 1966.
These American gangsters often controlled liquor sales, gambling, and prostitution, while making popular silk suits, diamond rings, guns, and booze. These many men, though often murderers and outright robbers, were sometimes also involved in the political, social, and economic conditions of the time. Infamous names of the era included people such as Al Capone, Vito Genovese, Jack Legs Diamonds, Charles Lucky Lucino, John Dillinger, and Bugsy Siegel.
Capone had moved to Chicago in the 1920s, where he worked for Johnny Torrio, the city's leading figure in the underworld. Capone was given the task of intimidating Torrio's rivals within the city so they would give up and hand over to Torrio their territory. Capone had also had to convince speakeasy operators to buy illegal alcohol from Torrio.
Capone was very good at what he did. In 1925, Torrio was nearly killed by a rival gang, and he decided to get out of the criminal world while he was still alive. Torrio handed over to Capone his business. Within 2 years, Capone was earning $60 million a year from alcohol sales alone. Other rackets earned him an extra $45 million a year.
Capone managed to bribe both the police and important politicians of Chicago. He spent $75 million but considered it a good investment for his huge fortune. His armed thugs patrolled elections booths to ensure that Capone's politicians were returned to office.
For all his power, Capone still had enemies from other surviving gangs in the city. He drove everywhere in an armor-plated limousine, and wherever he went, so did his armed bodyguards. Violence was a daily occurrence in Chicago. 227 gangsters were killed in the space of 4 years, and on St. Valentine's Day in 1929, 7 members of the O'Banion gang were shot dead by gangsters dressed as police officers.
In 1931, the law finally caught up with Capone and he was charged with tax evasion. He got 11 years in jail. Later, he retired to his Florida mansion, no longer the once famous gangster he used to be.